Hello, everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. Hope everybody's doing all right. Greetings, salutations, happy Tuesday, all of the things, right? Just all of the things. Yeah, welcome in. Been second week back from break for me. Today was pretty busy. Had to do a lot of prep work. Students actually come back tomorrow, so had to get stuff like rosters straightened out and get like all my classes opened and published and all of that fancy schmancy stuff. So it's not necessarily what I would call like super duper hard work, but it is very detail oriented, so you kind of have to like zone in on it. You can't just like do it while other things are kind of happening in the background. You got to really be like, a little. But welcome in. So yeah, we are doing viewer request tonight, and this is one that viewers voted on. So we do two types of viewer request. One of those is basically somebody buying an episode with channel points, and the other one is voting. So this is something that we all got voted on. What up, Green Herring? How's it going? Animated Quail Wave. I didn't know that one got animated, or maybe I've seen that one animated before, and I just have never made the point of noticing that it's animated. I don't know. How's it going, Green Herring? Good to see you, my friend. Hope you're having a good one. We're being visited by a puppy who is just sort of plorped down to the other side of the table here. And it's just getting some head scratches and neck scratches. Just generally being a big lump of fur. Oh, we had to clean up so much of her fur this weekend. You should have seen the vacuum cleaner when we got done with it. It's like you vacuumed we only have one room that has carpet, and we have a few other like big rugs, but I got through vacuuming the front half of the living room and had to stop because the amount of puppy fur inside had basically clogged the cyclone action, and it wasn't spinning around inside of the tube anymore. So there was a lot of shedding going on, just suffice to say that. Kilted Preacher, good to see you, my friend. Hope you're having a good one. Glad to hear that situation is doing better, and we'll just kind of leave it at that. Theo Rex, welcome in. Hope things are going well for you. We're talking about Dacia tonight, which is a topic that we've covered before. We've spoken about them here and there through several different streams. These would have been quite some time ago, though. These would have been way, way long back. Do you want to come up here? Okay, the puppy is asking. Hey, where are you going? Where are you going? I don't know if you all can see the puppy's butt. Hey, come over here. Come here. Do you want to come and see me? Come here. There's just furious itching going on. What up, Tuna? How's it going? Hey, come here. Come here. Come here. No? You're just leaving now? Okay, whatever. She's a giant mess. All right. Well, so Dacia. We've talked about them several times, but it's been a while, right? We've probably first mentioned them all the way back when we were talking about the Achaemenid Persians, which was literally probably years ago at this point, which is kind of crazy to even think about, that we can have covered something multiple years ago on stream. That just blows my mind. Again, I never really thought this would continue to go as far as it has, but testament to you all. So Dacia is one of these interesting little kingdom that sort of sits on the borders of a lot of other big empires, and it has a few moments where it becomes pretty big, and it has a few instances where it sort of makes a standout for itself, and then it goes really, really quiet. But that's because of a whole bunch of other stuff, and we'll talk about this at the end of the stream, kind of what happens to Dacia. But because I know that this is not a topic that gets covered very much either in school or in history, I mean, you all might not have ever had a discussion about the Dacians before, and that's okay. Again, that's what we're here for, right? We're here to talk about the stuff that you don't get on the sort of historical bus tour, right? We're here to talk about the cool people that get kind of shoved off to the side sometimes of history. So, first off, let's talk a little bit about who the Dacians were, and like just very, very basic. Who were these people? And that's a great question because we don't necessarily know as much about them as it would be comfortable to do. We would like to know more about the Dacians. There's actually quite a bit of good archaeology going on over in the area. Speaking of the area, what area are we talking about? Well, I found this really great map here. And it's sort of old looking, but I'll explain what's going on here. So one of the ancient historians is this guy named Strabo. And Strabo was sort of a geographer and liked to describe the borders of countries and things, and where people were and what peoples lived in what areas, etc. So if we're looking here sort of broadly at the Balkan Peninsula, if we zoom in to this sort of yellow region right here, this is Dacia. I'm about to have to sneeze, so give me just a second. Apologies for that. Isn't Dacius a character from Hercules, the Legendary Journeys? It's quite possible, Tuna. I will admit that I stopped watching Hercules Legendary Journeys after a little while because they left the legendary part far enough behind that it just turned into shirtless guys and scantily clad women in Greece. And then I think he ended up like even going up to fight the Viking gods or something. I don't know. It got kind of crazy. So I sort of bailed on Hercules, the Legendary Journeys. Also, I kind of found out that Kevin Sorbo had some what we might call interesting opinions that I don't necessarily share. So, yeah. Anyway, if you look at the yellow part here, we'll actually understand this right here. It says Getarum Terra, the land of the Geats. We'll talk about that in just a second. And we are looking here at the sort of the northern Balkan Peninsula, north of this big river right here. So this is the Danube, one of the important limes, or natural boundaries of the Roman Empire. So these people sit just to the northern, sort of central eastern Balkan Peninsula. That's what we're looking at. But this map is really interesting because this is based on Strabo's descriptions of where people live. And one other thing to point out fairly interestingly here, we have this region right here, which gets referred to as Thracia. And we'll be talking about them again in just a second. Tanker, that's a great question. Are we talking about the Thracians? We'll talk a little bit about that in just a bit, specifically the naming stuff. I have disappointed Tuna, I guess, because I bailed out on Hercules Legendary Journeys, and apparently it's a car because that's all that comes up when you Google it. Green Herring, we'll come back to that in just a little bit. Lots of little Easter eggy kind of things tonight. But broadly speaking, we're, again, talking about this region right around in here. North of the Danube, especially in this nice, big, sort of fertile plain right here, which is modern-day Romania, Moldova. We can put on the modern-day borders if you want to look at that real quick. So this is Romania, this is the northern part of Bulgaria, Moldova, Serbia, So this sort of region right around in here is what we're talking about. All right. So ethnically speaking, who were these people ethnically? Well, we do know that people have lived in this region for a very, very long time. Right? Human beings migrated into this area around the beginning of the European migrations. So as far back as 40 to 45,000 years ago, there have been people living in this region. But specifically speaking, when did people that we would call Dacians really show up? And that's a bit of an interesting question. We don't have necessarily a great answer for it, but we do know a few things that are going to be really important. First off, we do know that the local people that had lived there going all the way back until like a bajillion forever years ago had some connections with the broader Neolithic world. There's a place in Romania today that's called Partha. And this is a picture of, it's a recreation. The original site is in fairly poor shape. But this is a recreation of a Neolithic shrine that was in a place called Partha. It's in modern-day Romania. And this looks a lot like stuff that we would see in places like Istanbul, or not Istanbul, but like Turkey, right? So this looks like, your Göbekli Tepe kind of stuff, or your Çatalhöyük kind of stuff. So these people had connections with the broader world, but when did they become uniquely identifiable as actually Dacians? And this, again, we're starting to get a little bit kind of talking about Thracians. I'm gonna catch up. Easter eggs, so they were bunnies. No. Now let's heat things up. Were the Thracians Greek or not? No. No. Ancient people didn't think Thracians were Greeks. Modern people that have come up with ideas about who Greeks were in the ancient world are doing that mostly out of modern political bias. Greeks also didn't think Macedonians were Greeks. But that's a whole other hot topic that has literally caused heated discussion and people leaving the stream in the past. Disappointment is a meme.
Wait a minute.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
Okay, I can't watch a video because Kyle Wright is Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus. Kyle, thank you so much for being Spartacus once again. It is much appreciated, my friend. And if I can get my crap together, I'll put Spartacus emotes in the chat. There we go. It's only a model. What up, Paradox Moose? How's it going? Kyle, thanks again for that subscription. 33 months of support. That's crazy, crazy, crazy supportive. Tanker, modern politics is ruining history. Sort of. Second video, I also posted a meme. Okay, cool. Spartacus is my illegitimate father. Maybe so. What's up, Nixlotl? I see you sneaking in there. If you're not already following Nixlotl, you should go follow Nixlotl because it's cool stuff. And you can watch really cool art streams that also do animation and 3D modeling. I guess it's like 2.5D. Turning flat stuff into movie things. That's really impressive. So during the Middle Bronze Age, so if we're going back to, and by the way, Partha, the big sanctuary thing that I just showed you, dates to about 5000 BC. So we're connected to the broader sort of Neolithic, early Bronze Age world. By the time we get to the Middle Bronze Age, the migratory groups of people that are going to be moving around, we call these people Indo-Europeans, or these larger Indo-European migrants that are going to sort of come out of broadly this region and going to end up all over here, are also going to get over here. And this is when a lot of people start sort of kind of honing in on the Dacians being an independent, identifiable people group. But again, it's kind of hard to say. They do have they do have their own language. We'll talk about that in just a second. But over time, what we're looking at in Dacia is a tribal structure. And this is something that is hard to identify for modern people who especially are looking back in time trying to create a sort of continuity of nationality. One of the big things that happened in the late 1800s or throughout the 1900s, especially like periods like the Cold War and Imperial period, a lot of the countries in Europe tried to create these sort of overarching historical narratives of, our people have always been here. We've always been an identifiable people group. But if we read the ancient sources, and there are multiple, Strabo and Pliny and Herodotus, and lots of people mention these guys, Thucydides, it sounds like there's a whole bunch of different tribal people moving around in this area. And that is backed up by the fact that there is a lot of different physical types of culture that we find throughout the region. Also, it does seem to lag a little bit behind when it comes to city building stuff, right? So we have bigger cities in larger regions that are more populated, and the region, geographically speaking, of Dacia was still either semi-nomadic or small villages. You don't really start seeing big cities until later on to like the end of the Middle Bronze Age or the beginning of the Late Bronze Age, right? So this is like 1500 to 1200 area where you start really starting to have what we might consider like an active group of people that we could maybe call Dacians. Over the course of the next couple hundred years, Thracian people are going to move up in that area. By the time we get to the classical period of Greece, the Greeks are going to start building colonies in this area, specifically along this very nice coastline part of the Black Sea right here. So you're going to start seeing Greeks get added into the region. And pretty notably, there's going to be a big invasion of Scythians. And we have talked about the Scythians before as sort of a big imperial slash power slash kingdom slash group of people that caused a lot of trouble that sat kind of broadly this northern Black Sea coastline. How do you set criteria as to what defines a people versus the others? That's a great question, Tinker. Things like physical culture, religious iconography, which plays into physical culture, linguistics. Now that we can do DNA, we can do haplogroup testing, stuff like that. So there's a lot of criteria that kind of fall into this larger thing. What I was trying to get at mostly is that the Dacians, the people living in this region at that time, were potentially a varied group of people. They weren't all homogenous. You might have some elements of physical culture that show up in a large area, but they weren't necessarily all living in the exact same area, the exact same way, and they might not have considered themselves all the exact same people. So there are ideological differences as well, right? Considering yourself a member of a group of people is an important step, regardless of whether or not you might, be genetically related to them, right? Like I'm not genetically related to my in-laws, but I consider them my family, right? And that ideological difference is an important thing too. So people in the ancient world that considered themselves Dacian might not have been a homogenous idea, right? Like there were multiple different groups of tribal peoples that were moving around during this period of time. Were Greeks Indo-European? So Greek is an Indo-European language, and the people that are, and it depends on when you're talking about Greeks, there were people that lived in Greece prior to the modern Greeks. Your people like your Minoans and your Messenians, and your Dorians and all of those people. Who gets to call them what? Do they get to be called Greeks? It's like Mycenaeans didn't speak Greek. They didn't write Greek. They had their own language. They had their own culture. They didn't worship the same gods. But modern day Greeks consider the Mycenaeans Greeks. So, and the same for Minoans, right? The Minoans weren't, their language wasn't Greek. Their writing wasn't Greek. The Minoans were like way before the classical or even the like dark age of Greek period. So like the modern concept of what is Greek is actually very convoluted through history. But yeah, Greeks have Indo-European influence linguistically and culturally speaking, because Indo-Europeans end up over in the Balkan Peninsula. Well, I mean that's been Greek politics going all the way back for thousands of years. I mean, Alexander the Great, considering himself Greek, did not mean that everybody in Greece considered Alexander the Great Greek, right? So it's not just a modern thing. It's been around for a while. So let's look at this Scythian invasion thing here that I've been talking about. So we can see here the brown area. These are areas where the Scythians would have moved into, and you can see that they're sort of coming out of this region between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, and they're moving up and around into this area, and they're doing this in the 7th century, around 700 to about 600 BC. So they're moving all around into this area. They're going to beat up a lot of people over in these regions, including some of our people over here. Now, this particular group right here, this is Agatharsoi, but the particular word that they refer to themselves as is the Agatharsii. These particular Scythians that ended up over here were Iranian in nature, so they have ethnic ties all the way back to the Iranian plateau, and that's actually pretty important for some of the people that were in the ancient world. Some of the Dacians that are going to start identifying sort of as Dacian are going to put a lot of stock in that idea that they were related to these Iranian nobility. Anytime you have nobility in your history, you might want to lean towards that if you're sort of trying to, give yourself the good old leg up and stuff. So what I'm trying to say is about the time we get to about the 600s or so BC, we have a group of people that are originally the local inhabitants and then added a whole bunch of people on top of them. But this is going to sort of be the platform on which the Dacian identity gets built. So we've talked about this a little bit, but why do we call them different things? Well, if you read the ancient sources, they get called lots of things. By the way, I saw Viper sneak in and donate, but I don't know if you've said anything, but hey, Vipers, if you are quietly lurking in the background, I forgot to say hello. It just sort of popped into my head that I needed to say hello. One of the things that happens in the ancient world is a lot of people don't necessarily go travel. They sort of get everything, by hearsay. So you start looking at the Greek sources especially, and you'll notice that they're calling these people different words. Sometimes they're called Dacians. Sometimes they're referred to broadly as the people of Thrace. Sometimes they get called Getae, which is, we built this Getae. The Getae, the Geats, the people that are the Geats. So why did they do that? Why did they not use just one word for them? Well, again, this is probably some sort of remnant or leftover evidence that for a long time there wasn't just one people group in this area. Dumb question, what was the original language spoken and when did it start to mutate into other Indo-European languages? That's not a dumb question. So Indo-European linguistic groups, I can answer this quickly, or at least I think I can answer this quickly. People got to India about 80 to 70,000 years ago or so. If we are to believe China, that's not accurate, but I don't believe China because they won't let anybody else look at their stuff. India was a hub of migration. When people got here, they stayed there for a long time. a long time, because the Indus River Valley and the Ganges River Valley are both incredibly fertile. They produce a whole ton of food and good arable land, and the populations that arrived were fairly small, so it took them a long time to fill up this area naturally. So there are actually haplogroups. Haplogroups are genetic markers that show up within populations that are similar. So there are haplogroups, multiple haplogroups that actually develop in India as human beings were just sort of sitting there chilling. Then around 50 to 40-ish thousand years ago, there was a sort of point where India got kind of full, and they were like, you know what, I think we need to peace out. And one of those groups sort of went down this way and ended up in Australia, and that group kind of forked and ended up over here in China. And then that Chinese group went over here and all the way up across over into North America, blah, blah, blah. But one group left, especially this region of India right here, and moved back up this way. And these are the sort of proto-Indo-Europeans. Because when they left this region, they're going to sort of sit right here for quite some time and develop their own regional cultures. And then somewhere between about 2000 and about 1500, they're going to start moving out this way. Now, there was a part of that came back over here around 40-ish, 45,000-ish that populated most of Europe. But those people are going to meet up with these larger Indo-European people, so that's where the language really starts getting kind of what we might consider roots of the modern stuff. But like, there are words in English that are similar to words in Sanskrit, which is one of the oldest Indian languages, like ignite. Ignite is similar to Agni, which is the god of fire in really, really, really old Vedic texts. That are things like the Rig Veda, the Samudra Veda, the Yajura Veda. Everybody knows all the Vedas, right? But that stuff has roots all the way back over here in India. So we still have elements of our language today that go all the way back to India, that come from that sort of second wave out of India. Darth Vader. Good times. They should have made a wiki page to keep it straight. Yeah, if they would just figure out who is who and draw some pretty great boundaries and let everybody on Wikipedia argue over it, I'm sure it would have made everything better in the modern world. Anyway, so we called them lots of things. Sometimes you'll see them in the Greek world being referred to as the Getae. Sometimes you'll see them referred to as Dacians. Sometimes you'll get this sort of broad concept that everything north of Greece, so you have Greece and then you have Macedonia, and then you just have Thrace, which is like all over that region. And eventually you'll run into the Scythians. So whatever this region here is, Thrace? ? That kind of stuff. It's just like broadly blech. Not a lot of specificity used there. So if you go back and try to read a lot of the really, really ancient Greek sources, you're going to run into some trouble where you see these people named different things. Now, by the time we get to the Romans, they had standardized everything with Dacians. The Scythians, by that point, are actually going to have a pretty important impact, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Linguistically, let's talk a little bit about their linguistic stuff. They did have their own original language, since we're already talking about that. There was a language called Dacian. And we don't really know what it is. There is like maybe one inscription, and I say maybe because we're not sure if it's actually, maybe one inscription of the Dacian language, and it's using Greek letters. So it doesn't look like Dacian was a language that had its own alphabet. It looks like they adopted either Greek or then later on Latin alphabet to use for writing stuff, and they didn't really write a whole lot, which is troublesome because now we're trying to figure out like, well, what did their language look like? What were their language, elements? How did their grammar work? How did their syntax work? And we really don't know. We just really don't know, which is kind of unfortunate. By the time we get to about the 4th century AD, nobody's really speaking Dacian anymore. That has a lot to do with the impact of the Roman Empire. That also has a lot to do with the impact of later migrant groups coming through. But their language probably shows up in that Middle Bronze Age period. It has a few words that have maybe survived. We do have a big list of like place names, right? So like the proper names for locations, and we have some people's names, like this is the name of the king so-and-so, this is the name of the king so-and-so, or this is the chamber person of this person. So we have some like personal names. And we might have some loan words that have shown up in other regional languages that are still around today. But it's really hard to track down the origin of some of these words when you don't have a written vocabulary to base anything off of, right? So we don't really know too much about what the Dacian language sounded like or what any of it really looked like even. What up, Viscera? How's it going? How's things? Good to see you. So we know it's part of the broader Indo-European language group, but we don't know too much more about it without getting into like the really, really nitpicky stuff, which I know that some people might really dig, but etymology and linguistics is not everybody's cup of tea, right? When you start talking about diphthongs, some people are just like, I'm going to dip because you're talking about thongs. That wasn't a planned joke. I just made it up. I don't know how well it went over, but maybe. So, again, we're talking about this region right around in here. Now, later on in Roman times, there's another group of people that get referred to in this area called the Moesians. And are the Dacians the Moesians? Sometimes Rome considers Moesians Dacians, and other times it doesn't. This can be fairly well explained by the fact that sometimes the Dacians controlled land south of the Danube River. So at certain points in the kingdom, there were both north of the Danube and south of the Danube territories held by the Dacians. And the region south of the Danube, basically right around in here, what we would call modern day places like Bulgaria, the Romans referred to this region as Moesia. So if you see Moesians and they're referring to the Dacians, it might be that period of time where they are controlling south of the Danube. So there you go. You don't mean to... what's up, Sagiri? Good to see you. How's it going? You don't mean to be antagonistic, but without some physical proof, how can you conclude that the Dacians had their own language? Because we have them... Like, we have ancient people recording that they spoke a language that's theirs, right? So, like, Herodotus and Strabo, these ancient historians are talking about the language that they spoke. Like, they spoke Dacian. So we know that they had a language that was different than Greek or Latin or, even Scythian. We just don't have a vocabulary for it, right? So there's also a whole bunch of like that. The modern forensic etymology and linguistic stuff is ridiculously cool. I really like linguistic history, and you can argue a lot from doing like really deep sort of root word breakdown forensic kind of stuff. But we have records of them talking in their own language. It's not like we just made up that they had their own language. It's just that ancient people, don't like it's very, very, very uncommon for somebody from Greece or Rome to go up to another area and say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to write down your language, and I'm going to write a lexicon of all of your words down, and I'm going to write down a grammatic book, so like to a certain extent, when we get to Tolkien and he has Bilbo go to the elves and he writes this whole book on how to translate Elven, that's like, no. People in the ancient world didn't do stuff like that. It's very, very uncommon. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. That's true. I prefer mounds. The coconut texture of the almond joy is, when you throw an almond into the mix, it just doesn't, it throws off the texture balance to me. And I know that seems really weird, right? But like, if I want to eat something that's basically just like shredded coconut wrapped in chocolate, I don't necessarily need the almond crunch on top of that. And almonds get mushy anyway, and it's not even like a good crunch. It's more of like a squinchy kind of crunch. So I just prefer the mounds, right? Not really my thing. Did the Getaeans share their language with the Scythians? No. They were pretty far away from each other. It's fine. No. It's a fair question to ask. Like, if we don't have any of their words, how do we know that they had a language? Perfectly fine question to ask. That's like me saying, there's no evidence of a party. You all didn't have a party. And you'd be like, well, we just cleaned up after ourselves really well. It would have been nice if they would have done that, right? It would have really been nice if they had just straightened up their act and, gone through and given us a nice big chunk. So again, when do the Dacians become identifiably Dacian? Some people say like way back, all the way into like 3300 BC range. Some people say like late Bronze Age area. Some people say that they really didn't get any sort of stability until you have these big migrant groups coming through, like the Indo-Europeans or the Scythians. That the Scythians especially brought a lot of stuff with them, like new iron tactics, like new ways of smelting. They brought a lot of artistic influence with them. They brought a lot of cultural influence from the East, like Central Asia kind of stuff. So, that sort of kickstarts a lot of culture when you see, oh, hey, check out all these cool new things that we've got, right? So there's a phase of Dacia where we might call it like a pre-unified phase, right? That was just me being like hypothetical. Like if I said, you can't prove that I had a party. And you show up to my house and you go, there's no way you can prove that I had a party. I don't see, beer cans, and I don't see, crap thrown all over the place, and I don't see big wads of, like chips in the couch cushions, and like, you didn't have a party. There's no party here. And I could just say, well, my parents came back and I had to do the last minute montage of cleaning up the house in panic mode. And I literally threw the last bag of garbage out as they were pulling into the driveway. But I had to do that by dropping the can off the porch roof into, or the bag off the porch roof into the can, and then running over the top of the house and jumping down and climbing back in my window and getting in bed and like rolling over in the bed just as soon as they opened the door to check on me, right? As every good 80s movie ever did, right? That's the story of every good 80s movie. So there's this sort of pre-unified phase where we have lots of different people that can be considered Dacians, but are they unified? No, they're not. They are typically going to be smaller tribal units. They're going to trade, though. They're going to have some contact with the outside world. They're going to trade with the Greeks. They're going to trade with the Thracians. They're going to trade with the Celtic people that are further up into Central Europe. So if we look... Are you not entertained? Is that not why you are here? Steve Conley. I was lurking in your chat earlier, and I didn't know if you were making a Mandalorian. I don't know exactly what you were working with, but he was holding cards. I was trying to read some manga and watch your stream at the same time, and I got like half of one thing, and I didn't get all of the other. For those of you that are not already following my friend Steve Conley, why aren't you talking with Steve Conley on his stream? You got to go give Steve a follow. And you, too, can stay at the My Prancing Pony Inn, where alcohol is magical and wizards drink free, right? Steve is a cartoonist who does a really great webcomic called The Middle Age, which I find absolutely delightful, and it's full of very intelligent but very approachable, funny kind of pun stuff. It also has that guy, which is Waddlebottom, the king of all ducks, who is just an amazing character. Steve is also doing a whole bunch of stuff on Kickstarter recently, has been doing a whole bunch of stuff with like 5th edition add-on kind of things. He's done a standalone kind of wizard subclass called Intoximancer, which is pretty brilliant, where your wizard gains powers by getting drunk, which is kind of funny. And he's working on a new rogue subclass that involves like playing around with chance and throwing tarot cards that are deadly. Really cool stuff. So go give Steve a follow and hang out with Steve, because he's worth your time. And I don't say that about people that aren't. Steve, thank you so much for that raid. For those of you that are coming in with Steve and don't know who I am, hello and welcome. My name is Shane. I teach history and sociology at college. And on my stream, we talk about history, but we don't do it in like the stodgy old, like boring, Ben Stein on Ferris Bueller kind of way of talking about history. We goof off and have a good time and show pictures and look at maps and do all that kind of stuff. We just generally have fun around here, or at least I think so. So welcome on in. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Tonight we're talking about Dacia, which is an ancient kingdom roughly situated right there on the Balkan Peninsula, kind of right about here. And we're talking about the period of time right around 600 to about 500 or so of the BC era, where they aren't completely unified yet, but they're moving towards it. If you don't follow Steve and hang out in their stream, I will ban you from every channel that I mod on Twitch. Well, that's pretty broad. Tinker said, did somebody say free alcohol? Yeah, so Steve gave me very graciously this coaster, and I told him that every time he rated me, I was going to show off the coaster. So this is from an inn that is in his comic strip, The Middle Age. It's called The Prancing Pony, and it has some great little facts around the border of it. And I try to pitch it. I don't know. I just told him that every time he rated me, I was going to show the My Prancing Pony coaster. Because Steve's a great dude, and I look forward to catching him at a convention someday soon, hopefully. I know that he's got a lot of stuff going on, though. So, anyway, at My Prancing Pony, wizards drink free. Now, so Dacia, they're hanging out, they're doing their thing, they're identifiable, they've got their own language, they've got their own physical culture, they're kind of chilling out, doing their stuff. They got some smaller population sizes. They're not particularly going to be very expansionist minded. They're not like building up their population and building big armies and going and conquering folks. Here come the Scythians. They bring a lot of this stuff with them, and this is going to, again, is going to start changing them a little bit. The addition of the Scythians from the east is going to bring about maybe a little bit more of a class structure kind of thing. We're going to be looking at more luxury goods. This ties back into really big existing intercontinental trade routes. They're going to have a lot of access to cooler stuff now. So this is going to mean that the groups are going to start kind of being more internally competitive. So you start seeing maybe some of the kings or some of the tribal leaders get a little bit bigger, and they'll go fight each other, and et cetera, until this guy shows up. This guy is Darius, who is the king of the Achaemenid Persians. And Darius is a very, very powerful king. Big beard. So this guy shows up and is going to have a pretty big effect on the region, because he's going to conquer their coastline and some of the inland territories as well. So this territory right here that we see is the Achaemenid Persian Empire, a big old honking empire that stretches all the way over here in Central Asia, all the way over here to Northern Africa. Check out the mullet hairdo. Must have been a hockey player. No, he was an emperor that kicked a whole bunch of butt. But that was just one T. Note here that this whole coastline and even a lot of this territory that used to be Scythian gets conquered and brought into the Persian Empire. Now, this region up here where we're talking about, the Dacian region north of the Danube, right around here, this isn't going to stay in the hands of the Persians for very long. That's a long way away from the Persian homeland, and they didn't do so great conquering Greece. Now, if the Persians had conquered Greece, things would have probably been way different for the Dacians. But the failure to conquer the Greeks in the 500s and or I guess that would be early 400s. So we're talking about your Battle of Marathon, your Battle of this is Sparta, Thermopylae, kind of stuff like that, right? That sort of dissuades the interest of the Persians from focusing so much over that way. They also have problems going on over in the east. But exposure to this big empire, again, this is sort of bringing more cool stuff in when you're part of this larger world and you see how big the things are and how much cool stuff is out there. Some people are going to want to get that. When the Persians start receding, there's an interesting period of time in the 400s where we get a kingdom called the Odrysian Kingdom. This isn't something that shows up on the bus tour. And the Odrysians were a group of Thracian city-states that ended up forming a proto-kingdom right around in here. And by the time that the Persians are sort of pulling back, the Odrysians are going to try to bring the Dacians under their control. And it doesn't look like they were ever able to completely bring them under control, but it does look like some of the Dacian kings sort of played into the larger Odrysian Federation. So you do have some interest in sort of being part of a larger, even a conglomerate kind of cosmopolitan world. Dacia, 4-seater car on a Wrangle. Yeah, right? We're getting to the car part. I promise that there will be a car picture at the end. What up, David? Good to see you. If you all are not following David Peterson, you totally should. He's a great artist, good friend, great streamer here on Twitch. If you want to watch somebody do some amazing artwork that'll blow your brain up, go give David a follow. A lot of the shirts that I wear on stream are David's shirts with David's art on it. I'm not tonight. I'm wearing my Ninja Turtle shirt, which David would appreciate because, David's a big Ninja Turtle fan. As am I. Okay. So the Dacians are playing into the larger world now. They're getting out. They're seeing the world. They are experiencing new things. They're on their maybe their gap year, their Rumspringa, and they decide, you know what, we kind of want to be involved. We kind of want to be involved in some stuff. And then, well, there are more empires that are more interested in taking them over. So the Odrysian Federation is actually going to get wrecked pretty bad by this guy named Philip II. Turtle power, indeed. Philip II, this guy. You might know about Philip II because, he's not nearly as famous as his son, but he's a pretty important dude, and one could argue that his son would not have been nearly as successful as he was without this particular guy. Philip II is the father of Alexander the Great, so Philip II of Macedon. And one of the things that he wanted to do, he kind of had this goal of uniting the broader Balkan Peninsula in a single unified political sort of bloc in order to combat the Persians. This was his grand scheme, right? His coup de grace, his masterpiece. He wanted to unify the Balkan world. And that included the Dacians of Mastodon, yes. The Twitter alternative or the band. Neither. Macedon, as in Macedonia. I can put it here. That was a good bad hearing, by the way. Philip II of Macedon, if that makes it easier for you. But good catch there. I appreciate that one. Haven't actually tried Mastodon, but I don't like social media. I'm pretty bad at it, so I have no iron in the fire if Twitter survives or not. I do like Mastodon the band, though some of their newer stuff is kind of more radio friendly, and while it's good music, I kind of liked their older stuff that was just like, we're going to play really, really great guitar riffs for 5 minutes straight on an 8-minute long song, which nobody would ever play on the radio. I think they kind of peaked at their Moby Dick theme album. What's that one called? Blood and Thunder. Blood and Thunder is the name of that album, and it's really freaking good. I find it too complicated to bother trying the site at this time. That's fair. Is the word Balk rooted in the Balkans? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Let's look it up. You all get to see behind the curtain. Old English Balk, so probably not. Also Balk, Middle English Balk from Old English Balka, ridge or bank. Maybe so then, maybe so, because that ridge or bank, Balka, that sounds a lot like it could be the Balkan Peninsula because it's got so many mountains, but it doesn't specifically say anything about Latin. I don't know. Maybe we should just do Balkan. Adjective of or pertaining to the Balkans. Probably from Turkic. Huh. Okay, well that's interesting. I was unaware. I love that balcony is a derivative. There we go. For sure, older Mastodon feels better than the newer radio-friendly tracks. Thank you, Visra. I'm glad that I'm not the only one that feels that connection with the older stuff. Looking up the etymology of words in real time. That's kind of my bag. Philip balked at the Persian invasion. Actually, the other way around. The Persians got their butts kicked by the later sort of evolution of Philip's world, because he passed the throne to his son Alexander, who was Alexander the Great, who then went on to literally destroy the Persians. Well, not literally destroy them. He took over their kingdom. Isn't balk a baseball term? Yes, but I don't think that's spelled the same way. It might be. I'm not 100% sure. It's when you start... when the pitcher starts a motion towards one direction but then changes to another direction. As in the pitcher starts as if they were going to throw the ball towards the plate and then throws it to first base in an attempt to pick off a runner. And that is a balk. And at that point, the runner gets to advance a base. Didn't the Macedonians ally with the Persians at first against the Greeks before Alexander went after them? Depends on who you mean as the Persians. And what you mean as ally. The Macedonians were on... Okay, so Persia took over the Macedonians. And in the period of time where the Greeks were fighting the Peloponnesian War, this is when the Delian League led by Sparta was fighting the Peloponnesian League other way around. Delian League led by Athens was fighting the Peloponnesian League led by Sparta. The Macedonians were still running errands for the Persians, but that's because the Persians were still trying their best to have this tiny little claw hold in the Balkan Peninsula. They had lost most of their territory, though. Does that mean that they were allied with them? Not really. They were more of a fealty / vassal state, if anything. Philip certainly didn't have anything to do with the Persians. That was, well, Philip was, gosh, this is so like hairy. We don't really know what Philip was thinking because most of the historical sources that we have are talking about Alexander, and most of the stuff that talks about Philip is in a way to set up Alexander, and it's pretty clearly edited by Alexander to make Alexander look great, and it's pretty evident that Alexander didn't actually like Philip, might have also paid for Philip to get assassinated, so, you know, we've got a lot of speculation going on here. Philip was fine letting the Persians do stuff if it helped him in the long run. But does standing by and watching something happen imply tacit approval? That's a different situation. What do you mean by what do you mean by? It's a nasty scenario where we don't actually know everything that was happening and why. But Philip is going to go up and he's going to wreck the Odrysian Federation, and he's going to bring sort of like secondhand Greek culture. There's going to be some Hellenism going on here. And around this time, we start seeing stuff like this show up in the Dacian world. So this is the Sveshtari tomb, which is in the Dacian region. But if you look at this, it looks like a Greek tomb. It's got lots of Greek elements. Look, it's got columns, it's got caryatids, it's got some not easy to see fresco work up here. This, by the way, is in a big tumulus. I wonder if we can see the tumulus from space. Let's go back over here and see if we can zoom in on it. Thracian tomb of Sheshtari. Let's see. Well, we're going to go. Why would Philip bring Hellenization when the Macedonians weren't Greeks? Doesn't mean that he didn't think that he was. Again, the idea of, you know, what you think is different sometimes than the idea of what you are. These are the big tombs here. And we're going to get to... Ooh, check it out. Dude, we're inside the tumulus. Oh, this is the modern one where they've hollowed everything out. But this is still pretty cool. I don't necessarily like when they do stuff like this, but it's okay most of the time. So inside of this tumulus, there's this big tomb. So a tumulus, again, is just a fake hill that they made around the tomb. But it's pretty neat. I'd love to go see this. Of course, they don't actually let you go inside. That would be too much, wouldn't it? Well, they still want you to go and pay your your money to go see it. This is in modern-day Bulgaria. Had I been able to figure out how to take a car from Greece to Bulgaria or from Turkey to Bulgaria, that was one of the places that I would want to have gone to see. The problem is nobody will let you drive a car from Greece to Bulgaria or from Turkey to Bulgaria. Whatever reason. And feeling partial to columns, they evoke feelings of ancient and mysterious. Indeed. Indeed. But the fact that we've got kings building stuff like this, and I should note, there is a theory that this particular tomb, I'll put it here, it's Sveshtari, nope, spelled that wrong. There's a thought that this particular tomb might be attributed to one of the kings of Dacia, or one of the kings of the Dacian tribes, because it was very, very rich. It comes from around the same time. One of the Dacian kings married so after Alexander the Great dies, there's this big war of the Diadochi where all of his generals try to take over everything. One of those generals had a daughter that he married to a Dacian tribal king as an attempt to sort of bring these people into the larger fold. So there's thoughts that this particular tomb of Sheshtari is this guy's tomb. We don't know that for sure. A lot of people are like, oh, certainly it's the only person that could have done this, that it makes sense to do that. But like, I don't know. It'd be great if we had, a written anything that said like, hey, look, but we don't know. So Philip's going to come in, take over the region. The Greeks are going to fight over this region for a little while. And then they're going to get invaded by some Celts. Specifically some Celts from this region over in here, sort of the northern Italy Alpine region. They're going to just pop over this way. And the Latine culture of Celts is going to come over and take over the the Dacian people. Now, how do we know this? Well, we've got records from the Greek world and the Roman world, the Greek world at that point, that talk about the kings beating up the Celts to try to take over the area. Easy trek. Oh, yeah, it's just like, you can do that in an afternoon. So, again, we talked about this last time we did a viewer request. The Celtic world was this big old thing over in here, right? The Celts weren't just up in this region. The Celts were all over this area. So them getting over here into Dacia wasn't that far. It wasn't actually that hard. They didn't have to go over the Alps. They were already in the Alpine region, and they just sort of followed the course of the Danube down into the region. Not so very hard to do. We do know that during the 2nd century BC, there's a lot of fighting going on around up here, mostly between the native Dacian people and these Celtic people trying to push them out. But it is not until we get to the 1st century BC where we start seeing actually named, identifiable individuals that are going to be kings, like Burebista. Did I say hello to Lumpy? If I didn't say hello to Lumpy, I feel bad, but hello, Lumpy. This is a Roman sculpture of Burebista. And this guy was a king of a unified kingdom of Dacia. And we know that he was a unifier because we have pretty good Roman sources that talk about this guy. We even know the years that he ruled, mostly. From about 61 to about 45 BC. This guy was the king of Dacia. And he pushed out the Celtic people that had shown up to dominate the region. And he's also going to take the Greek city-states that were along the coast and fold those into the larger Dacian kingdom. We don't have a lot of internal sources about this guy. We've got a couple of statues that might be him. We've got maybe some coins of his, maybe. Pretty much what we know about this guy comes from the Romans. And it doesn't necessarily look like his kingdom was perpetually going to last, because when this guy dies and gives up the throne, it looks like Dacia splintered back into sub-kingdoms, right? So like maybe the original tribal territories, and there are 4, maybe 5, maybe even 6. 4 or 5 is probably a safe number. Kingdoms that are going to sort of come out of the unified Dacia, and then they're going to start fighting with each other again. And you don't really see a lot of stuff happening. But if we look specifically at the circumstances around Burebista's life, we can tell some stuff's going on up in Dacia. Number one, his empire or his kingdom probably was not very centralized. So he was a king and he had unified a lot of areas, but he probably didn't have a lot of power. And I'll tell you the biggest evidence to that in just a second. But we do know that there was more of this concept of Dacia looking outward. They had sort of shifted into wanting to play in the larger game. And we know this because we have records of them taking sides in Roman conflicts. I got to sneeze again. So after Caesar gets assassinated, we know that there was this big war between Octavian or Augustus and Mark Antony. Well, the Dacians pick sides, and Burebista is going to decide to throw his lot in with Antony. This is an interesting move because, again, there's this sort of broader eastward look of the Dacians at that time. Maybe they weren't necessarily considering themselves as close to the West, or maybe more as close to the Italians, maybe. I don't know. We don't have a lot of evidence to this, so trying to analyze this decision is a lot of speculation at best. So the do throw in with Antony, and that doesn't go over very well with the fact that Augustus wins, right? Burebista doesn't seem to be mentioned very frequently after that. But we do know what happened to him. And as another big piece of evidence to his empire his kingdom wasn't very centralized, Romans record that he got assassinated by nobles who were sick of the centralized power structure. And they wanted to go back to the tribal power structure. So Burebista gets and Dacia falls back apart again. And it's going to be a little while before we see another unified Dacian king. But wasn't that most kings in times of antiquity, like Philip, who married women of daughters from the kings he conquered? I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about. If we're talking about, are we back to talking about the Tumish Fest? I've lost the context to that one. Sorry, Tanker, that's me. Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of people didn't feel powerful, but he was probably in a tenuous situation. Like at the same time, contemporarily speaking, Augustus didn't feel like he was losing power. He didn't have to marry a whole bunch of people. He even exiled his own family. So Augustus was pretty powerful and felt pretty stable in his position. Didn't feel the need to, worry about that very much. We don't actually have a lot of information about Burebista having multiple marriages or anything like that. So, but he got killed. The assassins got him, and again, Dacia is going to fall apart for a while. What happens in the intervening period of time? Because it's going to be almost 100 years before we get another centralized king. Well, again, the Dacians broadly side with Antony. They're going to cause some trouble under Tiberius and Caligula. And I just realized that I have conflated some facts here. So let me clarify myself and let me fix myself, because I have messed up some stuff. So Burebista died in 45. That was before the big war with Antony and Octavian really got kicked off. So Burebista couldn't have thrown in with Antony because Antony wouldn't have been over in Egypt, and that he would not have been recruiting stuff yet. They would have still been in the wars where they were trying to hunt down everybody by the time that Burebista died. So I have to recant because I screwed my timeline up. So Burebista could not have thrown in with Antony because he was dead by the time that was happening. The kings after Burebista did throw in with Antony. Yeah, that's right. I apologize. I got it wrong. I had to fix myself. So there we go. Anyway, they start raiding a little bit south of the Danube, and this causes trouble for the emperors Tiberius and Caligula. Nero. Good old Nero. Nero was really interested in trying to make a name for himself, but unfortunately, he got killed, right? I'm trying to suggest kings of the time felt the same way. That's why they married women No. You're not interrupting. I just didn't understand. Like you don't have to keep apologizing for yourself. It's perfectly fine. We talk about stuff all over the place, and somebody will mention something later, and we'll be off talking about football or Lord of the Rings or something else like that. Don't ever apologize for having to ask questions. It's okay. The issue is I just didn't understand what you were asking. I'm sorry that you were sorry that we were sorry. Thanks, Tuna, who made it clear that I apologize too much. So sorry. That's the correct answer to that. The correct response. Not every king that was in the ancient world that felt uncomfortable married lots of women. Some people married lots of women because it was culturally appropriate for them to do so. Some people married lots of women just because they wanted to have lots of wives. I don't know if we can necessarily create a one-to-one link between I am feeling uncomfortable about my my ruling state and lots of wives. Polygamy in the ancient world is very, very common. It really doesn't stop. So polygamy doesn't start being uncommon in most places until the very, very recent time in history. And even then, how far do you really take polygamy if you're only married to one person, but you still have frequent understood on the side, like Louis the 16th, or no, I'm sorry, Louis the 14th, the Sun King, was only married to one woman, but dude had sex with everybody at Versailles. He wasn't in a polygamous marriage, but he wasn't monogamous for sure, right? You don't really start seeing monogamy kick in as a cultural norm until Christianity shows up. And even then, not all Christians get on board with the monogamy thing. For example, the early Mormon Church, who say that they're following the second day, the latter day teachings of Jesus in America. So they say we're Christians, we're just a different kind of Christian. They're completely down with polygamy for a long time. Modern Mormonism, the mainline version of it, is not down with the polygamy, but that doesn't mean that all of the Mormons aren't. So there are a lot of people that are sort of in splinter groups of the larger Mormon church that are polygamous. So surprised that as a species is still around when polygamy has recently died off. Having so many wives, it sure was not easy. Well, we can actually get into sociology and talk about that a lot, and anthropology as well. If we look at it from a purely genetic determinist point of view, the goal of any living being is to propagate DNA, right? And if we look at it in a purely rude or crude scientific way, it's much more easy for a biological male to have lots of sexual encounters that produce offspring than it is for a biological female to have lots of sexual encounters that produce offspring, because typically with the gestation period, that's going to cut down the ability of time that biological females can propagate, right? So this lends itself towards a polygamous model just by nature, if we're looking at it as a purely scientifically determinist point of view. I don't look at it that way. I do think that plays a lot into it. A lot of our social ideology is built on top of biological ideology, but I don't think it's the pure I don't think it's pure biological determinism. I think we have all that good free will stuff that messes everything up. But, it's all good. Getting off track a little bit. But that's okay. Nero gets killed. And he gets killed in 69 AD. And this sets off a pretty chaotic period of time in Rome and the surrounding area. And the Dacians are going to take advantage of this, and they're going to invade south of the Danube and cause a lot of trouble. And it doesn't look like they're completely unified at this point, but it does look like they're moving back towards unification. Because not too long after this, we are going to see the arrival of a single king. And that is a guy named Duras. So, Duras is the second truly identifiable unified Dacian king. And he's going to rule from around this time, so either 69 or 70 to about 87. And this is going to be sort of one of the high water marks of the Dacian world, because under him, they're going to invade south of the Danube, and they're going to conquer a pretty big chunk of Moesia. And this is kind of a big deal for the Romans, including, and I get to put on the adventure hat because I'm going to show you some pictures that I've taken myself. They're going to draw the ire of this guy. So this guy is the Antichrist. I'm just joking. This guy, well, I'm not joking, but this guy is Domitian, the Emperor Domitian. Dun, 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 dun. So what's up with Domitian? Well, so he's the emperor, and he doesn't really like the fact that the Dacians are taking over Roman territory. So he's going to go and invade. And this is going to be pretty bad for the Dacians, because they're going to invade. The Romans do in 86. And they get up there, they take their territory back. The Romans are going to win pretty big. They're going to retake Moesia, and the Dacians are pushed back beyond the Danube. And then Domitian makes an interesting decision, and that is, do we cross the Danube and go into Dacian territory to try to attack them on their home turf? And that's the tough question. What do you do there? How do you handle that? Well, Domitian actually went to the front lines himself. Like, the emperor went out there and met with his leaders and was like, what are we going to do? Should we handle this stuff? And the Romans decide, yeah, we need to invade. So Domitian goes back to Rome and sends a general over with a fairly sizable army. And the army gets up there and finds the Dacians in kind of turtle mode. So one of the things that the Dacians did as a sort of natural defense mechanism is use this mountain range. A lot of their cities in their country were built up in these mountains right here, including their capital, which is I don't even want to look at it. If I don't look at it, I can say it. Sarmizegetusa. Yeah, the problem is, like, I can't read it because my brain is all screwed up and I can't say words because of friggin' dyslexia. But I can close my eyes and say Sarmizegetusa fine, but if I try to read it, I can't say it. Sarmizegetusa, which is their capital, and it's up in these mountains. You can go see the remains of it today. I've got some pictures that I can show you. Not that I've been there. I would love to go see it. So this is some of their temples and some of their structures here. There's a kind of a retaining wall, and there's some really cool sort of fortified situations up here on top of this mountain. It's hard to get up there to it, though. It's a bit of a hike. You have to park at the bottom of the mountain and walk up the mountain. It's about 2 kilometers up the mountain, and it's not like a podunk mountain. It's a pretty big hill to get up there to see it. So when the Romans invade, Duras and the Dacians are going to sort of bug out to the hills. What religion did they practice? That's a fun question. It does seem like they had some of their own gods, but we don't have a whole lot of reference to them, and the references that we do have come from Greek and Roman sources that probably didn't actually understand them. We don't even have a lot of visual representations of those, and the visual representations of the gods don't necessarily line up very well. They were polytheistic. They had a lot of, the same sorts of things that a lot of the people had, your tribal festivals around things like solstices and, things like solar motions and star conjunctions and stuff like that during the year. It's hard to know for sure. But they did have their own gods. We do have a couple of their names, but the names aren't even, they don't even line up between texts. There's a lot of work where historical linguists have tried to say, well, this guy is that guy, and they just spelled it wrong. It's really, really hard. I probably should have mentioned that and just said they had their own religion and their own pantheon of gods, and we just don't know a lot about it. I just kind of avoided it because, I would love to say more about it. We just don't know a whole bunch about it, which is a fair question to ask, and unfortunately something that I can't answer. But we do know that they had temples to their gods. They looked a lot like Greek temples for a little while. Some of them were open air kind of things where it was just kind of a big wall and then maybe a sacrificial thing in the middle. But columns and porticos and stuff like that were all pretty common. So sorry I couldn't give you more info on that one. So anyway, at some point during the invasion, Durus is going to give up the throne. And we don't know exactly why he does this. But we do know that he gives the throne to a guy named Decebalus. I know it looks like Decebalus, but it's pronounced Decebalus. My pictures are out of order. This guy is Decebalus. He does not endure us. This picture of Decebalus is on a larger piece of work that I'll show you in a minute. I'll get to put the adventure hat back on. But this is definitely Decebalus. It's one of the few images of a Dacian king that is undeniable. Decebalus. Well, he is being defeated in battle when this frieze is taken, so we can't necessarily hold it against him. He's not in a good spot. Little tummy going on. Yeah, I see it. You got to remember though that the sculpture adds 10 pounds, right? So it's not, he's not as big as he looks. It's just the way that the light's hitting it, right? Decebalus. So Decebalus takes over as king and is going to manage to push the Romans out. And for a little while, they have to sort of lick their wounds, right? There's going to be a bit of a back and forth between Decebalus and Domitian. Domitian recognizes that he can't necessarily continuously send armies over the Danube, and Decebalus knows that he can't permanently fight off the Romans. So they're kind of at a mutually assured destruction position, and Decebalus comes up with this really interesting idea. He sends word to Domitian and he says, look, here's the deal. We pushed you out. You gave us a whipping, but we pushed you out. And I would like to offer terms of mutual treaty. I'm not going to surrender to you, but here's the deal. We can make peace between ourselves, and all that I want out of it is I want you to promise not to come over here, and I want you to give me a crown. I want Rome to recognize me as king of all of Dacia. This is a pretty canny move here, right? He was going to enter into a verbal alliance with Rome, but not necessarily like I'm going to send troops to go fight with you, more like you recognize me, I recognize you. But he's going to get external recognition. And this is a big thing for kings in the ancient world, where you've got other people that send messengers to you, and they want to deal with you, and they want to talk to you, and they want to make treaties with you. That gives you a lot of leverage, right? And it's not too long ago that the Dacians had a central king, and then they split back up again. So Decebalus might be thinking, some of these nobles that are running their mouths around here aren't necessarily completely pacified. And if I can get the Romans to go, hey, that's our guy, maybe they'll shut up. So this is a pretty brilliant move. It gets Rome out of your back door. They're not going to invade you anymore. And you get to parade around wearing a literal diadem sent to you by the Roman Emperor Domitian. Pretty smart stuff, right? I think I know where sci-fi authors get the names in their works. A lot of the names mentioned tonight I've seen in books and movies. Oh yeah, historical stuff gets mined all the time for writing. So what does he do? Well, he gets his throne, and he starts building power like crazy. He starts making alliances with regional tribes. He starts bringing their populations into his army, and he starts building really big walls around their cities. One of the things that the Romans were able to do really successfully, especially in the flatter open plains part of Dacia, was they rolled right on over the Dacian cities because they didn't have big walls. Now, the fortified positions up in the hills were different, but he wants to make them immune to siege weapons. And Romans were really good at sieges, right? They knew what they were doing, and Decebalus had watched them do this stuff, so like he kind of knows how to plan and how to plot and how to maneuver. So he also starts accepting Roman exiles, which is really kind of an interesting thing. Domitian didn't have a lot of friends in the Roman world. A lot of people thought he was a second coming of Nero, and he was not a well-liked person, and he exiled a lot of people, including political opponents. And Decebalus starts kind of having this kind of, I don't know, he gets this plot in his mind where he's like, look, if we can accept these Roman exiles, they'll come over to Dacia, and they'll tell us all of the secrets. And they'll give us legs up, and they'll tell us like, oh, well, this is where that person is, and you need to fight here, and you need to attack here, and you need to do this over there, because these people had been exiled from Rome, and they hate Rome, and we can kind of stick it to the Romans by accepting all of their exiles. And this doesn't happen like, hundreds of times, but there are a few fairly big named people that end up in Dacia with Decebalus being a thorn in the side of the Romans. And it's a pretty brilliant move. Really, really intelligent tactical stuff here. He's not being at open war with Rome. He hasn't caused any trouble. He's just, hey, look, you kicked him out. I was trying to be nice. We're kind of friends now. I was maybe trying to make their lives a little bit easier. And he gets the plausible deniability of, intel from these people that were inside the Roman world. Now, Domitian goes away, and we get these new series of emperors that are going to be good emperors. The 5 good emperors: Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. But it's the second guy, Trajan, that we especially want to talk about. And I can put my adventure hat back on, bum-ba-da-bum, because we can look at some stuff. Nope, that's the wrong one. That's the adventure hat emote. You, go away. Fine, forget it. That's the fire hand emote. I'm just not doing very well tonight. Anyway, there we go, blah, blah, blah. This is Trajan. Emperor Trajan. I've been to the place that he died. It's in Turkey. Pretty cool stuff. So, Trajan, what up with that guy? Well, he's going to be... He's a big dude. Decebalus gets a little bit too big for his togas. And he decides that it's time to maybe start expanding a little bit outside of the natural Dacian territory. Not into Rome, but outside, and bring more external tribes into the larger kingdom. Maybe we need to have a Dacian empire. And Trajan is a little wary of this. And Trajan, first and foremost, is a military leader. He is a general. He had been a general way before he was an emperor. He was a successful general, very smart tactician, and was unafraid of swinging the sword. So Trajan sees what Decebalus is doing, and he sees through all the bullcrap. And he recognizes that Decebalus is trying to become a power. So in 101, Trajan is going to preemptively invade Dacia across the Danube. And this is a very sudden attack. It's with a big army, and it puts a walloping on the Dacians because Decebalus did not expect this, didn't see it coming, and didn't have a lot of preparation. And after this sort of, these are what are called Trajan's Dacian Wars. This was the first one, and it was only a year and a half long, from 101 to 102. Rome is going to win hands down, and Dacia has to accept peace on Roman terms, which is not what they wanted to do. And as part of the terms, Trajan builds a really big bridge at a place called Drobeta, which is going to be across the Danube. And the sole purpose of this bridge is, I want to make it a lot easier for me to get my troops across this river. And this kind of like, this is irking Decebalus because, first off, Rome kind of broke its word, right? It didn't stay peaceful. And Decebalus got spoiled, right? His sort of larger schemes got foiled by Trajan's preemptive attack. So Decebalus doesn't sit still. He just goes right back at it, and he's going to try to rebuild the cities that were wrecked. He's going to try to rebuild his army. And Trajan is like, I'm telling you, I'm going to come get you again. And Decebalus is like, all right, bring it. And Trajan brings it. And this is the second Dacian War, Trajan's second Dacian War, from 105 to 106. And this one's bad. Because when Trajan comes back in 105, he's not coming back to give Decebalus a black eye. He's coming to kill him. And Trajan begins to systematically take these big hill fortresses. He starts on sort of one end of the mountains down around in here and just sort of like rolls them up. He ends up taking I tried to do it again. I tried to read it again. Sarmizegetusa. He tries to take that. He has a big siege, ends up taking the city. This is the capital, right? Decebalus manages to get out. But it doesn't really do him any good. Because where does he go? Right? Rome has taken the plains. They have taken the hill forts. They have taken the capital city. Decebalus doesn't get very far. He ends up running to like one last little holdfast, and the Romans catch him. And instead of getting captured and put on trial and probably being paraded around, Decebalus kills himself. And at this point, Trajan annexes Dacia, the whole thing. Just, you are now part of the Roman Empire. And this is the end of the Dacian kingdom in 106. And it becomes the Dacian province of Rome. And Trajan, oh boy, does Trajan get to brag about this. And he does so with something that's, albeit, pretty friggin' cool. So if you've ever been to Rome, you may have seen this thing. This is Trajan's column. And it is not too far from the Forum. But what is really interesting about this particular column is that if you start down here at the bottom, you get the whole story in a big spiral of the Dacian Wars, of Trajan invading and the armies of the Romans and the Dacians fighting, and Decebalus being driven out of his city, and Decebalus killing himself, and Romans destroying the big walls of the cities and burning the fields and taking prisoners and killing folks and sacrificing and annexing the territory. This is really friggin' cool. One of the cooler monuments in Rome. If you ever get a chance to go see it, you should go see it. So Decebalus dead at his own hands, and Trajan, emperor of Dacia. Now, the Romans are going to be pretty heavy-handed with Dacia, and are for a long time. This is going to lead to the elimination of the Dacian linguistic elements and groups and language, because Rome is going to Romanize them. Rome is not going to hold that region forever, but they hold it long enough for the idea of a unified Dacian kingdom to basically die. Now, there are some people later on that call themselves the Free Dacians, who are mostly up around here in the north, and then a little bit over here in the mountains, that kind of say that they are the remnants of the Dacian kingdom that are standing up against Rome, and they cause some trouble, and they try to establish their own identity, and maybe try to claw back some territory, but they're not really ever going to get back. Like, there's no real motion that comes out of that. And it's not too much longer before that region of the Balkans just gets completely overrun by subsequent invasions of Goths and Vandals and Huns, and then just like Slavic peoples and Massagetes and just all sorts of people. So the Dacians never really get an opportunity to completely come back. So the modern day state of Romania has a lot of tie to the Dacian kingdom, and a lot of those people still hold people like Decebalus in pretty high regard. There's a big monument to Decebalus on the side of a mountain. Let me see if I can find that. Rock sculpture of Decebalus. Yeah, it's up here right around Sarmizegetusa. Can we get a... Yeah, let's get a ground view of it. Check that out. Dun, 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 dun. So you get this big, like, Mount Rushmore-esque face of Decebalus on the side of the mountain, right? So they still put a lot of stock in these people, right? But just realistically speaking, the kingdom of Dacia was never really going to have another streak of glory, right? They had hit their maximum at that point, and they would never come back. That was made fairly recently. I don't actually know the dates, but probably I think in like the last 20 years or so. I'm guessing, do I think that ancient leaders were smart enough to know that if they killed an identity, that you kill a people? There's definitely some knowledge of that, right? The Romans were pretty aware that if they could convince people to Romanize, they would calm down, right? That was one of the biggest Roman tools, was the Roman culture. Like, do you want to be a citizen? Do you want to be a citizen of Rome? You got to Romanize. And if you Romanize, we'll give you citizenship. And then if you are citizens, you won't argue with us as much, and you won't rebel against us, and you'll adopt our gods, and you'll start using our language faster. So, I mean, they understood that ethnic identities were important to people groups, and that those were things that could be syncretized or mushed down as a way to pacify those people. So I think the answer to that is yes. I don't know when that was made. But no, I did say that I would show people cars, or a car. And I do have a photo to share with you. So Romans were pretty smart. Now, they weren't the only ones that did that. But I mean, ancient people are pretty. I mean, like, if we look at all the way back in like the like Hammurabi, the Code of Hammurabi, right? That was I'm going to conquer you, and I'm going to instill my law code over the top of you. Right. You had your law code. You don't have your law code anymore. You have to follow my law code because you're now part of Babylon, and you're going to sacrifice to my gods because my gods are cooler than your gods. Right. So, I mean, that's kind of we've known that kind of stuff for a long time. Like the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Yeah, that was definitely something that the Romans did as a way to sort of mess up the Jewish people. But they also basically depopulated Jerusalem not too long after that, where they basically forced every Jewish person out of Jerusalem and then spread them across the Roman world as a way to keep them from bunching back up and causing rebellions. So, also, what up, Nintendo? Anyway, I said that I would show you a picture of a car. Boom. So, when Mac in a lab coat, Mod in the chat, and I were running around Greece in 2019, 6 months before the shutdown, right? We were driving this little guy right here, which is, KP mentioned the model earlier, and I didn't know if he actually knew the model, but this is a Dacia Sandero. And this is the little model car, or, well, I mean, it's not a model car. It was basically a model car, but this is the car that we drove probably to many places that we should not have been able to. This thing did not have four-wheel drive. It's a really dinky kind of standard. The clutch was like ridiculously deep. It can hold 4 adults if you are 4 European adults. When I drove, had to push the seat as far back as possible and still felt like I was driving a Mario Kart. But I'm 6'3" and sort of odd, so there we go. But anyway, there's a Dacia for you. The Dacia Sandero that Mac in a lab coat and I drove for 12 days while we were in Greece. By the way, this is at Thermopylae. The bay of Thermopylae is just right here, and these are the mountains of Thermopylae that go right around behind us and then around the loop here. So this is where the battle would have been fought. This is actually at a parking lot for the big monument to Leonidas in Greece. It's just the best picture of the car that I could find. So there you go. There's the car segment, right? I said that I would show you a Dacia, so... there's a Dacia for you. All right, so that brings us to the end of what I had prepared. So there's your viewer request stream for the Dacian people. And we do have a little bit of business to handle. So let's try to handle that business before we get too far into the weeds here. So first off, we need to see if anybody wants to buy a stream. So I have the list of people that have asked to be on the list, and if you are here and want to buy a stream, say so. So top of the list, David, art thou here, and do thou wants to buy a stream? After David, we have Lumpy. If you are still around and want to buy a stream, you are number 2. And number 3 on the list is JMR Killer. So JMR, if you are here and the other 2 aren't, who are you all, and do you want to buy a viewer request stream? I'll give everybody a little bit to respond. I don't know who all's here. I know that Lumpy was in earlier. Is Lumpy still around? And I saw David around earlier, if David is still around. All right, so if nobody on the list wants to buy a stream, how about anybody in the chat? Anybody at all? If you don't know what the devil I'm talking about, you can't see it right now because I don't have it turned on, but there is a viewer request redemption where you can trade 10,000 channel points for a viewer request stream. It's called Choose Your Own Adventure. And it's like those old books you used to get where you could, choose your own adventure along the way. So it takes 10,000 points if you've never bought one before, and it takes 20,000 after that. So if you want to buy a second adventure or after, it's 20,000. So does anybody have the points and the idea? You have to have both. You don't get to buy it and then sit on it. You have to tell me what it is immediately. $1 billion. I'd take $1 billion. If you've got $1 billion, you don't even have to give the stream points. Just donate that junk via PayPal, and I'll do streams for you for like the next year for free. How about that? And Tinker wants to see the puppy. Let me call the puppy. Heads up, she might be asleep, so it might take a little while for her to get back here. Oh, I've already yelled, so she's probably awake at this point. And she's probably looking for a toy, because if she was asleep, she's probably not going to want to walk back here without a toy. Okay, I hear her walking, so... You're gonna come and see me? Oh, yes. Oh, she's got her Pop-Tart toy. Well, come and see. You want to come up here? Come here. Hey, come here. Come see me. Come here. Or do you want to come over here? Well, come here. Come here. Hey, do I need to take the toy from you? We can put it right here, and that way you'll come up here and see me. Come up. Come up here. Oh, yes. There's the puppy. Hello. Hello. Give me some sugars. No, you just want your toy? Is that what you're after? Now she's mad at me because I took her toy. Yeah. To get her up on the chair, I had to take the toy from her. But then when I take the toy from her, she will immediately leave because I have betrayed her trust by stealing her toy. So, there's that. Okay. Anybody want to buy a stream? Anybody? Anybody want to buy a stream? If not, we need to resort to additional options, which we have plenty of. So, anybody can do it. If you've got the 10K points and an idea of what you want to stream on, Brittany will buy one. Okay. Now it's going to cost 20,000 for you because I'm pretty sure that you've bought one before. Have you bought one before? Or have you just gotten really lucky at getting all of yours? By the way, my wife is really, really, really good at suggesting things that everybody else then votes on. All right, so I have turned on Choose Your Own again. You've got too many points. Well, I hope that you've been donating towards the majillion point goal that I set for an all opinion hat stream. I'm starting to wonder if Iranian Revolution. Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one and topical. Yeah, that's a great stream. I really actually look forward to doing that one. So our next viewer request stream will be on the Iranian Revolution. Excellent choice, my dear. Okay. So that being said, does anybody else have anything else? Like, do we have anybody want to ask any questions? Anybody want to redeem any more points? Anybody want to do anything in particular? Otherwise, I think we're going to go and do a raid. But we can hang around if people have questions or stuff or want to do stuff. But I think we'll raid here not too long. If nobody just jumps on stuff. Maybe everybody's tired of hearing me talk, and that's perfectly fine as well. Because, I just talked for like about 2 hours straight, so. Well, there was a little bit of a break for a puppy, so, The standard question book. There's a good one. All right. So we're going to be very careful with the standard question book. It's a book full of questions, and we don't know the answers, but maybe we do. Let's get one really, really close to the front. Like, really, really close. Does that actually have... Yeah, okay, here we go. So we're going to... No, I don't think that's... that's the table of contents. That's too close to the front. How about... Yeah, okay, here we go. We've got some questions. And we'll get this question right here. I'm going to be very careful because last time we used it, I kind of half broke the spine. Oh, wow. This is actually kind of appropriate. Name 2 countries that were conquered by Alexander the Great. So that's topical and direct. So he conquered a lot of countries. Gordia, Phrygia, Persia, parts of India, Egypt, lots of countries. Yeah, the table of contents. So there we go. Who was Aristotle? Of what great teachers was he the pupil? What was the Achaean League? What was the cause of the Achaean War? When did Greece become a Roman province? Give the meaning of the word laconic. That's a good one. Laconic means kind of lazy and laid back, and it comes from Laconia, which is the part of the Peloponnesian Peninsula where Sparta was, because they didn't actually do any of their own farming. They had most of the Peloponnesian Peninsula under slave labor, called this group of people called the Helots, especially over in Messenia. So, the Macedonian language, much like the Dacians, there's no physical record. Is that there are more pieces of evidence and inscriptions of the Macedonian language than the Dacian language, by quite a bit. So, but we don't have what we would call a full vocabulary of it. There are more examples of that than there are the Dacian language by far. Okie dokie. So I guess it's time to go do a raid. I kind of let things sit around and goof off last time, and it got a little out of hand. So let's just call it a raid and do a thing. Would Macedonian language be considered a Greek language? So Greek is a language. There aren't like Greek languages. There are like Balkan languages. There are Greek. What are the words here? Dialects. But like there's not a linguistic family of languages called the Greek group. So like ancient Macedonian would have probably had Greek influence, but it was an Indo-European language, not a Greek language. So, all right, Lumpy. Good to see you, my friend. I hope you have good sleep, and I'll see you next time. Yeah. All right. So let's go raid Aristotle. Aristotle raids us all the time. And Aristotle's a cool dude, and I like hanging out in his chat. So we're going to go raid Aristotle. Yes, Moose, you can. I'll put you on the list. You are on the list. Raid fast, he's raiding me. Okay, well, I'll see everybody next time, and we'll go raid Eris real quick. Ha 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 ha. See you next time. Take it easy, everybody. See you around.